We do begin the readout tonight on our one-year anniversary, no less, with another day. Another member of the disgraced, twice impeached former president's inner circle in trouble with the law. Tom Barrack, remember him? The former chair of the former president's 2017 inaugural committee was arrested today on charges of illegally lobbying the campaign and the Trump administration on behalf of the United Arab Emirates and for failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. A 7-count indictment unsealed in a New York federal court today accuses Barrack and 2 other individuals as acting and conspiring as agents of the UAE between 2016 and 2018. The indictment alleges that Barrack provided UAE officials with sensitive non-public information about developments within the administration. Barrack is also charged with counts of obstruction of justice and for lying to the FBI about his dealings with the Emirates. Barrack is a longtime friend of the former president and is alleged to have used that relationship to get language inserted into one of then-candidate Trump's speeches at the behest of Emirati officials. While Trump didn't wind up directly praising one of the Emirati officials, as had been originally proposed, he did wind up promising to work with Gulf allies.
We'll work with our Gulf allies to develop a positive energy relationship as part of our anti-terrorism strategy. We'll work with them because we have to knock out terrorism.
According to the indictment, after the speech, an Emirati official emailed Barrack stating, quote, "Congrats on the great job today. Everybody here are happy with the results." Barrack is also alleged to have arranged a phone call between Trump and a top UAE official in 2017. In a statement, a spokesperson said Mr. Barrack has made himself voluntarily available to investigators from the outset. He is not guilty and will be pleading not guilty. Barrack is also one of 7 former Trump campaign associates to be indicted. And if the charge of failing to register as a foreign agent sounds familiar, Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chairman, was convicted on that very charge before Trump pardoned him and his deputy, Rick Gates. Prosecutors have asked that Barrack be detained until a bail hearing can be set, given his wealth, access to a private jet, the fact that Barrack is a citizen of Lebanon, which has no extradition treaty with the United States, and because of his ties to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Joining me now is Chuck Rosenberg, former U.S. attorney and senior FBI official. And I guess the obvious question here, for Tom Barrack, who seems like a pretty smart guy, pretty well-read individual, is, and it kind of goes for Paul Manafort too, wouldn't it be easier to just register as a foreign agent?
Oh, absolutely, Joy. Look, this is not that complicated. Everything they did, they likely could have done if they had just followed the rules. And the rules say, Joy, if you want to represent the foreign government, if you want to represent Canada, tell the Attorney General, put it on record, file periodic reports, tell us what you're doing. And if you do that, Joy, have at it. Represent Canada. There's no issue there. The issue is when you fail to register, because really what the law is getting at is transparency. We want to know who's representing whom and what the hidden interests are. So if you're transparent, you're not in trouble.
And if somebody takes the huge risk, I mean, this is something, you can get 5 years in prison for this, right? And I assume that somebody like Paul Manafort, who was wearing like crocodile, jeans and stuff, they don't want to be in prison. So as a prosecutor, what tends to be the motivation for people who fail to register and still try to represent foreign governments?
Yeah, another good question. So it's a little bit of a mystery to me because registering is not that hard and it's not that complicated. Unless they're doing something really underhanded, unless there's some subterfuge, go ahead and register. And then you notice when he was questioned about it by the FBI, according to the indictment, he allegedly lied. Right. So you're taking a problem that's not that significant, one that you could easily avoid by being transparent, and you're compounding it and making it much, much worse by lying to the FBI, which is, by the way, Joy, a separate felony.
It's a separate, right. We remember Michael Flynn, General Michael Flynn, who is a general and was a Defense Intelligence Agency head. You'd think he'd know not to lie to the FBI. I guess my last question here is what we're looking at here, because we know we talked a lot about Russia and their attempts to gain influence over the Trump campaign and potentially over the administration, and attempts to do that by, talking with various officials. Are we talking about here that foreign governments were trying to buy influence? Is that really what this boils down to?
I think that's exactly right, Joy. Foreign governments want influence with the president, with the new administration, with the new senior officials. And again, if you disclose it, it's okay. If you don't disclose it, it's a violation of federal law. You know, every time the Washington Post writes a story about Amazon, they note in the newspaper that Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, owns the Washington Post. You know, that's good for the newspaper, it's good for the reporter, and it's good for the reader. Everybody knows what the relationships are. And so that's all we're asking with this law. Does the UAE want influence? Of course they do. Is that okay? Sure it is. We have a State Department that is particularly and purposefully set up for that reason, to have relationships and conversations with governments around the world. If you're going to do it, though, as a private citizen, disclose it.
It seems so elementary, my dear Watson. In this case, my dear Chuck Rosenberg, thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here to enlighten us this evening. All right, joining me now, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. And, you know, I guess the reason I asked the question in that way, Senator, thank you for being here, is that it does seem like a certain class of the rich simply want to do their business their own way and not follow the really simple, basic rules. Is that really what we're looking at here?
Oh, I think that's exactly right. You know, this is a man who just thought he was bulletproof in every meaning of that word. The rules just don't apply to him. They only apply to the little people. He had Donald Trump's ear, and he was willing to use it no matter what, whether it involved conflicts of interest, whether it involved a violation of the law. But, you know, there's another piece to this one, it seems to me, and that's the question about whether or not just what he has done, and it looks like a clear violation of the law, failed to register. But is registration really enough? One of the things that I think is a real problem is if foreign governments want to try to influence the United States, let them send over their delegations. They don't have to hire people here in the United States to lobby our government. I don't think that Americans ought to be lobbying the government on behalf of foreign officials. And by the way, that is one more reason that we should be pushing forward on the For the People Act. It has great provisions to protect voting, great provisions to get rid of gerrymandering, great provisions, though, to beat back the influence of dark money. And part of it is starting to put more restrictions on lobbying. If foreign governments want to talk to our government, then let them send their own foreign delegation. They'll be clearly identified and we'll know who they work for.
And I'm so glad that you put it that way, because I think that is the concern, is that you have the wealthy coming at our government at all times from every angle. You've got domestic businesses, businesses with foreign headquarters. You've got the Amazons of the world. They all want to pay almost no taxes. They all want tremendous influence over whether they're regulated or if they're regulated at all. And people don't seem to want to be open about that. But I feel like that's the core problem. And so, Senator, I guess I know this is something that you care a lot about. Are you concerned, just being in the middle of that Senate maelstrom, that the For the People Act is kind of getting backbenched and sort of traded away as Democrats are so excited that they're going to get this big infrastructure bill that's got all this good stuff that Democrats, and particularly liberal Democrats, have wanted for a long time?
You know, I never like to tell tales out of school, but today at the lunch for the Democrats, we were talking about that infrastructure bill, but there were also hands up in the room to say we have got to go forward on For the People as well, that we cannot let it fall behind, that For the People is about protecting the vote, about getting rid of gerrymandering, about beating back the influence of big money. And that's where it all happens. This is about our investment in democracy. It is about our investment in the future. So, yeah, right now, the headlines are all about that infrastructure bill. And look, I'm in there fighting for the parts I care about, too. But what we have to remember is that what we must get done as a Democratic Senate is we must pass For the People. Our democracy depends on it.
You know, and I'm glad that you're putting it that way, because I'm starting to wonder if maybe I'll just ask you, what kind of creative thinking are we seeing in terms of how to do the both and here? Because we did see Amy Klobuchar say something that I thought was pretty brilliant, which is to say that maybe if we're expanding our definition of infrastructure, election infrastructure then comes in. Maybe we find ways to push things into the infrastructure bill, or are there punitive things? I remember when I was growing up, you know, the state of Colorado didn't want to lower their speed limit to 55, and the federal government said, fine, you don't get any federal highway money, right? There's money coming to states that are hurting voters. Are there ways to be creative about using the infrastructure package to get some of the reforms on voting through?
Potentially there are. And we're certainly looking into all of them. Just had a conversation about that early this morning. But understand, For the People has provisions in it that I don't think we can get in through reconciliation. Because remember, we have the parliamentarian who's going to be sitting there saying, wait a minute, is that a money provision or are you trying to create new law?
Yeah.
So I don't want to have to rely on that. I want to keep saying, I'm glad to talk about infrastructure. I'm glad for us to move infrastructure forward. But we have to remember the end goal. The end goal is that we have got to protect our democracy, protect our vote, protect the meaning of that vote on the gerrymandering rules, and beat back the influence of dark money. That has to be a first priority for us. Get them both done, I'm all in. But we've got to make sure that we protect our vote for the people.